We are back. And as always, we want to give you a small tip to be able to put all of your questions or comments for the speaker through the chat that is indicated with a button on the bottom part of your screen. With this way, we can make it more easy, more fluent, the process of answers and questions from our next expert. Uruguay is for Chile and has always been a positive reference when it talks about the meat market and also about their successful export. That's why we are honored to have a very important speaker, not only in the production of the livestock, but also his participation in the public-private instances of the export of the meat market. We're talking about this Guzmán Tellechea. Currently, he is the vice president of the Rural Association of Uruguay, ex-president, ex-member of INAP, the president of the study Uruguay. We want to leave with you Tellechea, who's going to talk to us about the sectorial success factors and challenges for the export consolidation of livestock in Uruguay. Go ahead, Mr. Guzmán, it's all yours. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation. For us as Uruguayo, it's a pleasure to be with you in this forum. Colleagues and friends, I'm going to start with my presentation. Uruguay is an excellent cattle country. We have a history of more than 400 years. And here you can see this is a semi-open cattle farm. This is an old graph which shows us the world. Uruguay is also a football country. And for each cattle head, it has 2 football fields. This is a Uruguayan field where you can see that Uruguay are very heterogenic. And it has a very careful handling of the animals. The animal welfare in all of the rodeo stages is a very important premise. We are prohibited by law to use antibiotics and anabolics for growth factors since '62. We have been using not been using it for a lot of years because of this law, and we comply with it very strictly. 78% of the exports of goods, 10 of them are agriculture and livestock products, where you can see the meat is more than $2 billion of export. Wood, which has been a good, which has grown quite a year due to a policy of stimulating the forestry because of the wood and the cellulose. The soybean, which is the main agriculture, which produces 912 million. Dairy products in all of its chain, it's very well developed, very traditional in Uruguay. The dairy cattle and their processing plants and exports. Then we have cereals and everything that you see here on the slide. And I would say that we have an access of more than 130 markets of the meat products. In Uruguay, we are producing in agreement with the environment and with an international certifications in the countries that are very important for this modern world. We have more than 50,579 establishments for the agriculture and livestock. We have 15.7 thousand hectares for the livestock, 11.18 million bovine. We are doing 12 million now, 6,200,000 sheep, and 734,000 of dairy calves. This is the Uruguayan population that is updated. We have 35 slaughtering houses, but 35 of these, 20 of them are equipped and authorized for the most demanding markets. In the last decade, the average of slaughtering was 2,200,000 head of cow each year and 1 million sheep. This is an extraction of 21% extraction average of 21%. Here you can see the graph of the bovine with the high and the low due to the market because of the climate of competition between the different guilds, and also the beef and the lamb. Uruguay in the second half of the 20th century, a high production of wool and lamb, and then it began to evolve in more than 27 million heads. But in that time we had around, and this has been evolving in another livestock with the new integration of the sheep. The sanitary policy and the traceability is an issue that we have given a lot of importance. But we have maintained a sanitary policy and traceability where we are all in agreement. This is an integration in the public-private, and I would say this is one of the strengths that we've had in Uruguay. And in this policy, we are free of the foot-and-mouth disease without vaccination. We are free of the BCI or the crazy cow disease. We are prohibited of using steer anabolic or hormones for the raising of our animals. And since 26, we've had a traceability system, which is obligatory. This was a work of a team integrated not only by the cattlemen, but also the industry and the meat corporation together in an agreement with the government, because this is part of the government when we arrived at this traceability policy, which is obligatory and electronic and individual. Uruguay has a production which is mainly natural meat, and this is one of our slogans. Uruguay has maintained this in our market, where the beef produces 87%, the poultry 6, sheep and 5, pork and 1. And then we have different certifications like the certified natural beef, the animal welfare certification, and different certifications for the European Union and other countries where Uruguay is exporting. The slaughtering of the animals in the last decade, as you can well know, has had some vacillations. In 2020, we went over the amount of bovines of 2 million. Today and this year, we have at the 20th of June, the first semester, 1,250,000 heads. That means we are talking about over a 20% increase this year. And when we talk about the bovines, in the last 1,700 of the equine and of the goats, is, you can see this on the graph. The slaughtering of the bovines has recovered, or the processing of the bovines, because there has been some moments where we had very low because of different reasons. Back in Uruguay, they have a huge percentage, a very high percentage in the composition of animals who are in open field and natural pasteurization or pasturing, I'm sorry. The climate influences quite a lot, but this begins changing, and as time goes by, we have been evolving with a higher intensity to a higher amount of supplements. And we have seen those that are going in the corral, 481, as the speaker mentioned. When we talk about the rearing and the on-grow and the intensive at a very early ages. And that has been accumulated in the last months. The slaughtering of the bovine has recovered since 2021, reaching 22 million, 2,028,000. Here we are in the middle of October, which the Safra, we have been seeing more steers, and we can see the amount of animals. As we see that the animals of the corral has been increasing, and here we see how that this work has been evolving. This industry has been evolving. And there we have 21% of the steers that come from the feedlots. And in the heifers, we have 24%. In the first quarter of the feedlots represented 13.3%, and they've almost have 79,000 animals and 30% over the level of 2019. To give you an idea where we are on this commercial sense, the steers in the fourth balance, like we call the fourth balance, which is on the slaughtering line when the animal has been, after he has been bled out, the ingressing, where you put in the fourth balance, and this is where we fix the price for the producers. The prices in Uruguay for a long time are being budgeted in dollars, and today we're at the $4, and today we are above this, but let's put $4 a kilogram of the channel, we would say, between the steer and the producer. The lamb on hook has very similar prices. And this last week, it went above the $4. Both animals were above $4. There is a recovery of the prices of the producer in 2013 and 2020. Because of the pandemic, we had some commercial problems, as everyone has had, mainly from the European Union, where we all know what happened. The export price, the bovine price with the average as the carcass were over $4,000. The last week, the average was 5,600. But this represents what's the average is the 4,100. And the lamb is 5,700. There's also an increase this because we have been increasing of the average prices per kilo that is exported. The export on foot had a great demand in 2010, 2011, then we reduced and we had a high increase in 2018. Almost 400,000 heads. And then a fourth reduction, I would say, has been dropping. A great contribution of Uruguay has been China. The meat breeds that we use mostly in Uruguay. We have a similitude with Argentina, but I think even more into British breeds known as a Hereford and the Angus. There we see the animals that are registered and what has to do with the genealogical records of the parents taken to Uruguay, how they begin evolving. Hereford has been the main breed for many years, and the Angus has been growing quite a lot, and today it has a participation, very important participation, the Angus. And there you can see it at 47%, 37% Hereford, and the others, you can see it. And the way that the cattle is made up is mainly British, as we mentioned, and they're crosses, as we call them here. The red and the black color, aletas. What has happened to the cattle and the way that they are being produced? What have we done in the last decades? The beef has reduced its age of being slaughtered of 13 plus years because it's mainly with natural pasturing, and the pasture was also, and the demand in the of the butchers and also the external market has made us to reduce the age but increase the weight of the animal channel. What I'm saying that we are above 500 kilograms an average of a live weight, and we are around 250 at the average channel of meat. This graph shows it clearly. What is the graph of the live weight with 1 tooth, 6 teeth, and full mouth? The milk production, which also has improved, they have improved their productivity. I think this is something very good that you can look at. It has reduced the amount of farmers. I think that this is a world tendency. And the surface, also the farms, about 2,250 in 2020, which were giving milk to the processing. Plus, that means 1,000 producers less than a decade ago, but not the volume. The volume goes up, but the low number of milk producers. This is something that really concerns us for the cattlemen and also for the dairy farmers. Uruguay has more than 130, but the different markers or brands, they begin changing their prices. Here you can see the dynamics, and they are being concentrated in destination markets. Our Chilean colleague was showing the participation of the exporting of Chilean market. China has a huge concentration. Here we can see it. The participation of the beef, China, over 50%. Then we have 23% in the NAFTA, which is the United States, Canada mainly. And then we have had a very important drops in the European Union for everything that is happening in Europe because of the pandemic, but also other reasons. The consumption of beef has reduced quite a lot. And today we have a high concentration of China and the United States mainly. The participation of Israel dropped. Russia was at one time our main customer in an individual way. And this shows how the dynamics of the markets are in the world. And in this sense, I want to mention the huge flexibility that the industry, the Uruguayan industry has, because it has the possibility of entering in all the markets. We can go to Japan, South Korea, but we are looking at Asia and South Asia, seeing how this is evolving in their demand. And just as was also mentioned before, how this is also changing the participation and the world consumption. The same thing happens just as the bovine or the beef. They had a big purchaser. The Europe and Brazil are our big partners. Now it's China. It concentrates a lot, the lamb production, and Brazil and European Union. We have a problem, which are the taxes. That is why we always look at Chile with envy, with the healthy envy, because of their aggressive policies of the free trade commerce. In Uruguay, we are paying in taxes $341 million. We can see how it is distributed with the United States, China, $184 million. We're practically 70% or 80% of the beef is in the Uruguayan for the different markets, $200 million. I'm going to talk about this later. The strengths and the sanitary status according to the markets that they are coming in. We have a high acceptability of our purchasers due to the conditions of the slaughtering houses, high availability of knowledge and experience throughout the whole meat change. That means Uruguay has a transition of more than 400 years. 200 years. And this is a long tradition for the livestock and agriculture. The existence of the installed capacity at a technological level can respond to the demands of the different markets. The companies with an exporting experience, since we have so few inhabitants, we have 12 million heads of bovine, and we are exporting a lot of this, and this allows us to have a vast experience in exporting meat. The recognized genetics and quality recognized around the world. These are bovines. We have the Angus that has a very good quality that's recognized worldwide. Its crosses. This institutionality that has a presence in international markets, a very strong interaction between the public and private. And you can see this in the meat institutes where they have a board with the government and the producers. And then we have good opportunities to sustain demand and a meat growth. We have more demand that we can offer, and this is something very good. We have access to demanding markets. We are sending to markets like Japan and Korea. Small quantities, but even then the taxes what's so expensive for us. In Korea over 40, but those are just things that we are solving. The needs of some of the markets to carry out these trade agreements. This is a very huge challenge that we have, and we want to share with you the privates with the government. When we talk about the weakness and the threats, we have high productive costs in comparison to our competitors. Our country is in dollars. It's been for many years at very high costs in dollars for different reasons. I would like to have a longer speech, but anyway, when we talk about the exchange rate, this is one of the problems that we have in the different sectors, exporters. We are always somehow marking the dollar, very tight dollar, if you want to call it that. And there's a lot of discussion regarding this about the inflation. It can be a measure of acceptance, but very bad. What has to do with the whole sector of the purchaser. We have our president in the last Mercosur summit talked about the Mercosur. This is a subject that I'm sure that all of you will know about this. When we talk about the threats from our competitors, like Australia, New Zealand, Chile, fundamentally Australia and New Zealand, who's competing with us with the big volumes, very high volumes that they can transport, and that they have zero taxes. In China, we are over 10%, 10 or 12, 13% in average. And in such an important market, this is a very strong advantage. A lot of competitors with lower productive costs. Argentina and Paraguay are competing with us a lot with their production costs because of their currency. They have other problems. When we talk about the changes in the preference of the consumers, this is a threat where maybe there will be a change in the preference of the consumers and all the alternative meats. This is a little bit of the summary of what we have of some of the threats. The objective of today is to talk about the first neutral carbon of Paraguay, to make a differentiation of the Uruguay market for a consumer that every day has. Uruguay has been working strongly on this. We are doing studies, but more than anything, this is not the mission of the greenhouse effects, but we are talking about a balance. Uruguay has a very good balance. The beef meat has the first neutral carbon seal in Uruguay. We are going to be present in Expo Dubai in 2021. We understand that this is one part of the world where we have to pay a lot of attention is the Middle East and North Africa. These are the countries that make up this expo. Here we can see the integration of the population of these countries on the left-hand side, how much they consume of meat per habitant. To give you an idea of what we are looking at. And the expenses of beef per habitat and dollars per year, and how it is evolving. So this is an issue that we have very present. So this is part of ours. Thank you very much, and we can answer any of your questions. Thank you, Don Guzmán. It is the corporation who are very thankful for all of the information that you have given us today. And there are questions. The first one says, under the Uruguayan experience, is it very difficult to produce meat without anabolics? In a public-private agreement, we understand that it's easier to produce with anabolics, especially when they're intensive on growth in the feedlot. But in Uruguay, we have prohibited the use of anabolics and antibiotics as a growth promoter. For instance, in the 25% in our meat destination has dropped down to a 10%. But this issue was completely unnegotiable, as in other countries. But in Uruguay has also achieved a type of a seal of natural meat. And one of the things is because of the traceability, the not using anabolics or antibiotics for on-growth. And the on-growth has been on natural pasturing systems. Not everything is perfect, but we have put priority on this. And right now we don't want to change our policies. Thank you very much. What has been your experience of exporting animals on foot from Uruguay? What's your vision of the export to other countries, neighboring countries? And what has happened in these last years with the productive numbers of your nucleus population in Uruguay? This is a long discussion. We believe in the freedom understood in its best concept, the free market, liberty of acting, and always an open, a door that's a revolving door for the industrial and for the government. It's better to give freedom in this area. And this opening door of coming in and coming out, there are opportunities for the market. What happens? Uruguay has had since the 1990s the free export of animals on foot, live animals on foot. There were some prediction that this could be a huge damage for our industry and for the national hand labor. However, this is what happened, was a huge stimulus so that the cattlemen would broaden their herds, they would have better improvements. And in that moment, what Uruguay was slaughtering animals, we have passed this number of over 2 million, 2,200,000. This is the average of the last years, with highs and lows of everything that has to do with the export of live animals. But this has improved in everything that has to do with the price, where the first link is the calf and the rearing did not receive the full price that they understood that they could receive to be able to have a better stimulus and a higher production in the future. However, this functioned just the opposite, and as we could foresee, in this liberty, the producer would want to make a big effort to produce even more. And this is what they were able to achieve. Not only the farmer could have the possibility of selling his calves for the internal market, where the rearers would give their offers, but also they had to compete with what's coming from other countries to bid for that. So the import of cattle somehow was free, but of course there were some barriers that were given from the importing countries. For instance, the European Union, which have always asking us for regulations, have put us some clauses of the processing plants that is exporting. They have to pay for animals that are been raised and finished on the pasturing systems. That is why the import of live animals is practically very reduced. Uruguay has grown quite a lot with everything has to do with invoice, export, in such a way that in the last years, what Rafael was talking about, these import and export to the United States is clear. They export at a very good price and they try to import at low price. And this gives them a dynamics. In Uruguay, in the last years, we have exported more tons per month than anything that was historical, but it's also importing meat. We supplied, because of all of the barriers of these protocols that were put from other countries for the import of meat, and somehow this also benefited the competition for the final consumer in Uruguay. I don't know if you understood that. We have a long conversation about this. It looks like it. What is the success of the on-grow on the pasturing system? Is it with the selecting of the breed with the pasturing, or is there any other reason? Uruguay has a very rich tradition in the genetic and forage and the selection over 200 years that we have in Uruguay. 410 years. It has a temperate climate, which is very apt for the great rearing cattle. It has some soil of very good quality in many areas, and others not. But what this allows us to have, and it has a long tradition of education and everything that has to do with the cattle. So in Uruguay also, There has been an integration of the public and private, which has been very, very strong, with a lot of potential to grow, to improve of the forages. And I would say people who know what they are doing. So through the improvement of pasturings, the supplementation of which are more habitual, and the good extension that we have had and continue existing, or research institutes as part of the market, the marketing policies, the National Institute for Research and Development for the Agriculture and Livestock. There is a lot of institutionality and a long tradition. I think that all of this added together, what God has given us, where the natural conditions has allowed us to be a cattle country. What happens is we eat a lot of meat. I think too much. We continue being the country that consumes more beef per capita. But this also shows, because if we're eating so much, then if we like it so much, it must be good. Of course. There's a next question. Have you developed the brands? There's a lot of discussion for the brand for our country. And finally, we installed all of the meat industry has to go through the Uruguay brand. But at the same time, there's a lot of private brands. And some business that the producers have, like brands like the Rancho or whatever, for different niches in the market. And we are always looking and studying niches like organic meat in the United States. There's some in the United States, but we have good success there. Natural meat, I'm sorry. But everything has its different brand. At the same time, so with the selecting of the breeds, they have generated brands, and the industrial also have their own brands. So for brands, we don't have any problem. There is an observation, or I would say an opinion, of an auditor who's very interested, very good presentation. I hope your experience helps us a lot in our country. This is from one of the audience. However, I would like to ask you to be able to sum up and to be able to finish this presentation. What is your vision about the livestock in Uruguay, and what do you think will occur with the meat production in the next years? I think in Uruguay, we have a very solid base for everything that I said because of the tradition, the natural conditions that we have. We have a country that's also very irrigated. We have streams, rivers in every direction. We don't have very dry conditions nor extreme in climate. We have the obligation to improve our livestock. And how do we improve it? We need to reduce more the time that they're out in the field, our productive indexes, our deficiency in our rearing or in the attraction. The only thing we can do it is improving the food. The genetic, we have it, and we continue improving it. The Uruguayan, we sell a lot of the reproducers. But we need to improve and intensify a little bit more what has to do with the feed of the animals. And it's improving. It's improving. The percentages have been improved, and the supplement of forages and also supplement of grain. And each time we are increasing a little bit more the This is an issue about prices. When the price is not very good, it's very difficult for the Uruguayan to grow on very intensive systems. That's why we do a lot of on-grow on natural pastures. But things are beginning to improve. On the other hand, I think that there's something that is very important, and it's being very important. Which is the irrigation. It's something that we need to do in Uruguay. We have a lot of irrigation in the rice, for instance, and we see it also in the corn. So we have very few irrigation in the cattle. We are talking this a lot with the authorities. We think that the irrigation, if it goes with us, the price, the policies, they are being very stimulating. But we also have the tariffs, which is a very big limitation. So I think that there is a lot that we can advance. Depends on the conditions. The problem is they are very dynamic. And today we are very concentrated in China. But I think this is something that we are looking at to be able to expand this. But regarding your complete question, genetics, feed, coefficients of production. Thank you very much. There's one last question, but in the time I would like to answer one phrase. What's the importance of the infiltration in the Uruguay? Infiltration. It gives it firmness, gives it more flavor. This helps with the genetics. The marbling, then it improves its this marbling. This has to do with the animals that are smaller of the breeds. The Angus, we know that it's very famous for the marbling texture. Giving the food, there's no problem. When you see the cut, which are animals, which are not bigger than 24 months in Uruguay, with a diet regimen which is very strong, then you can see with the marbling, which is fantastic. So this is very important. Of course it is. Thank you so much. The truth is, this is very passionate for our audience, and we could spend all afternoon listening to your comments and your very assertive vision about the meat killed. But we need to say goodbye to be able to continue with our program. And we want to thank you so much for part of Ciago and your patience and your generosity of sharing with our production chain of beef production, everything that is happening in Uruguay, information that is very interesting to us and very complete. Thank you so much, Mr. Guzmán. It's been a pleasure having you here with us. I would like to send a lot of greetings because I have a lot of Chilean friends. I want to say hello to Chile in general, that I wish the best for all of you. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to improve what we are suffering from. A hug to everyone. Thank you so much. Also for you and to our auditors, the people who are listening, we invite you to separate just a couple of minutes because we're going to go to our next presentation.